Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Welcome to another session of Ask Dr. Saleem. Here in this series, we take your questions and we post them for Dr. Saleem. So our first question asks, I heard from Javed Ahmed Ghamidi that taking interest is haram but not giving. But when you take a loan from bank and you give it back with interest, don't you in some way support or promote taking of interest?
Yes, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. You see, you have to first understand the issue of interest as it has been explained in the Quran. First of all, the thing is that in the whole of the Quran, there are about 4 or 5 instances in which the issue of interest has been discussed. And not at a single instance has the Quran prohibited or condemned the paying of interest. At all instances in the Quran, all instances, there is not a single exception. Wherever the issue of riba or interest is discussed, it is always the charging of interest or the consuming of interest which is basically proscribed. And that is because the person who is paying interest, he is actually suffering an oppression because he is required to pay some extra amount over and above the amount that he has borrowed. So that is why the Quran has made it a point that people who are oppressing are the ones who are charging interest, and therefore they have to give this up. Now, as far as this question is concerned, that if you are paying interest and you are actually contributing to this whole scenario, it's not correct, because you see, you're not paying someone, or you're not paying interest simply because you are going to have your own interest or your own vested interest at stake. You were in need and you took a loan, and for that loan it was mandatory for you to return the exact amount, but on the contrary, you were charged with something extra. So this is like an injustice that you are suffering. So that is why the paying of interest has not been discussed in the Quran anywhere. Yes, there is a hadith narrative which has been the cause of this misconception, but if you look at the words of the hadith narrative, they have been grossly misinterpreted. The hadith says that, the popular translation of the hadith says that the person who is paying interest and the person who is charging interest and the person who is writing down the whole transaction and the person who is a witness over this transaction, all these three are equal. If you look at the Arabic words, the word which is generally translated as the person who is paying interest, the actual translation, if it is to be done a precise one, it is the person who is not paying interest, but a person who is bringing people to the interest, the lender, and he's acting like the agent of that person. So that is why the next two things which are prohibited are people who are writing down the whole transaction and people who are actually bearing witness. So all these people are basically abetting, or they are aiding the person who is in charge, who is the person who is the lender. So in order to translate this word in this proper context, it would be that a person who is charging interest, and all those persons who are abetting him, who are helping him, who are accomplices in their crime. And for that matter, the person who is paying interest is not at all an accomplice. The accomplice are people who in the form of a racket, they bring forth people who are potential borrowers, and then they arrange for writing it down, and then they arrange for witnesses over that document. So that is what the Quran is prohibited, and the hadith which I just explained. So in short, what we have to understand is that the paying of interest is not at all prescribed or prohibited in Islam. It's just the charging of interest.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem. The next question asks, how do you convince parents to allow you to marry someone if they don't agree for that person?
They have to be told that they don't have a right to stop their children in any way. This is a wrong advantage of their position that they are taking. And they must be asked that on what grounds are you stopping children from not exercising their own will? Remember, these are not no children anymore. They are grown-up adults. And every grown-up adult has been given the authorization and the authority to choose his life decisions or her life decisions. It could be marrying a spouse, it could be moving out or staying in some country or whatever place one wants to go. It's also choosing a profession. So all these things, they are left to the discretion of the person. And there is one verse of the Quran which is generally misinterpreted once again, and people think that as per that verse, the Quran is giving the parents unlimited authority over their children, because generally that verse says, I'm going to translate it generally. First, the Arabic is فَلَا تَقُلْ لَهُمَا أُفٍّ وَلَا تَنْهَرْهُمَا, which means that don't say uff to your parents and do not scold them. So the word uff actually in Arabic language means don't show disrespect. But people who are generally not conversant with the Arabic language, they take the Urdu meaning of the word uff. And this is mostly the case with Desi parents because they have been brought up with this. So in Urdu, in the Urdu language, uff, yes, it does mean that you should not argue with your parents and you should accept them. But this is not the Arabic meaning. Remember, the Quran was not in Urdu, it's in Arabic. The Arabic meaning of the word uff is to don't show respect, to not to show disrespect and be impertinent in any way. This is only just one instance in which the Quran has, people use this Quranic verse to imply that parents should be obeyed at all costs. In the whole of the corpus of the Quran, there is not a single verse. This is the only verse which has been misinterpreted. Otherwise, all other verses, they clearly say, وَبِالْ وَالِدَيْنِ إِحْسَانًا, which means that you treat your parents with kindness. Obedience to the parents is not an issue at all. You have to be obedient to God, you have to be obedient to your conscience. That is, of course, understood. But as far as taking life decisions are concerned, you have to tell your parents that if they are trying to impose themselves, that then they should show some authority, some sanction from the Quran or Hadith. As I said, this is just one instance which is often quoted by the parents, and I've just explained that it has been misinterpreted.
Thank you, Dr. Saleem. The next question asks, when the Quran says the further away mosque, referring to Masjid al-Aqsa, the Masjid al-Aqsa that we know today doesn't exist. This mosque has been created on the Solomon's Temple, if I'm not wrong. Does it mean Quran was calling Solomon's Temple the further away mosque?
The word Masjid al-Aqsa, of course, is referring to the farther or the away mosque, and we know that, of course, it was not a built structure at that time. It had been raised down. But that doesn't mean that the mosque area, which had been demarcated for the mosque, was not there. So even if it was there in the form of a demarcated area, and in which most of the area of the temple had fallen down, that is absolutely fine. So yes, it was referring to the Baitul Maqdis or the temple, even if it is not fully constructed.
Thank you, Dr. Saleem. The next question asks, if a person prays to Allah to help them to make a decision, if he does everything, make dua, yet get divorced, and now regrets and desperately wants to go back to his ex-spouse, prays in tahajjud, what could it be?
If he has divorced his wife and the iddat period has passed, all that he can do is, if the wife is willing, they can remarry. That's as simple as that, unless he has given more than one divorces. So we need to know what exactly happened. Otherwise, the recommendation of the Quran has always been that you just utter or pronounce a single divorce, so that if you plan to get together once again, you always have this chance. So once the ceremonial iddat period, which is like 3 months, it passes, you can marry again.
डॉक्टर शहजाद, मेरा सवाल ये है कि खुदा को तो पता है ना कि अज़ल से, यानी पहले से, कि मेरे majority of the civilizations of human civilizations शिर्क में पड़ेंगे. हमें क़िसस अल-कुरान में भी इससे भी यही साबित होता है कि बहुत से अक्सरियत पैगंबरों की जो उम्मत थे वो शिर्क में मुब्तला होते और उसी की बुनियाद पे उनको सज़ा दी गई थी. तो अगर इतना ही शिर्क, इतना ही इनटॉलरेबल सिन है, तो खुदा ने एट द फर्स्ट प्लेस इस दुनिया को बनाया है क्यों? ये मेरा सवाल है.
तो देखें, इसमें कुछ गलतफहमियां हैं. ऐसा तो नहीं है कि पूरी दुनिया शिर्क में गिरफ़्तार रही है. ये ज़रूर है कि जहाँ अंबिया आए हैं वहाँ पे ज़्यादातर कौमों ने शिर्क किया है. लेकिन देखिए, शिर्क जो है वो अल्लाह ताला ने कोई किसी पे इम्पोज़ नहीं किया, किसी को फ़ोर्स नहीं किया. शिर्क के अपने अवामिल हैं, उनके अपने मुहर्रिकात हैं. उन मुहर्रिकात में पढ़ के लोगों का ये अपना फ़ैसला है. सो अल्लाह ताला ने तो दुनिया जब पैदा की तो इसलिए नहीं पैदा की थी कि लोगों को जहन्नम में डालेंगे. उन्होंने तो अबदी ज़िंदगी के लिए लोगों को एक मौका दिया था कि आइए आप अपनी ज़िंदगी को संवारिए और मैं आपको अबदी ज़िंदगी से नवाजूँगा. ये चैलेंज तो अल्लाह मैंने दिया था. तो ये तो जब इसके बाद इंसान ने ख़ुद ये फ़ैसला किया कि वो अल्लाह ताला के अहकाम को नहीं मानेंगे या शिर्क में मुब्तला होंगे, तो उनमें भी देखिए 2 किस्म के लोग हैं. एक किस्म के वो लोग हैं जो जानते बूझते शिर्क में गिरफ़्तार हैं, उन पर ज़ाहिर है अल्लाह ताला की सज़ा भी नाफिज़ हुई. लेकिन कुछ ऐसे लोग हैं जो दुनिया में बहुत बड़ी तादाद में हैं जो बेजाने बूझे शिर्क कर रहे हैं. जैसे बहुत सारे लोग हैं जो मज़ारों पे जाते हैं, या हम अपने भाइयों को देख लीजिए जो क्रिश्चियंस हैं, وہ بھی جانتے بوجھتے شرک نہیں کر رہے. وہ تو انہوں نے حضرت عیسیٰ کو بیٹا بنایا ہے, تو وہ تو یہ کہتے ہیں کہ یہ اصل میں خدا کا جسدی ظہور ہے, خدا ایک ہی ہے, اور اس کی تعویل کرتے ہیں. تو اس وجہ سے آپ دیکھیے کہ جو لوگ شرک کر بھی رہے ہیں ان میں سے جو لوگ ہمارے ہمسائے ملک میں ہیں, ہندوستان میں, ان کو تو آپ اس کے بارے میں کہہ سکتے ہیں, لیکن ایک بہت بڑی تعداد جو عیسائیوں کی ہے ان کو ہم توحید پرست کہتے ہیں. اب یہ کہتے ہیں کہ بگڑے ہوئے توحید پرست ہیں. یہی معاملہ مسلمانوں کے اندر پایا جاتا ہے کہ بہت سارے توحید پرست مسلمان ہیں لیکن قبروں پہ جاتے ہیں, وہاں پہ پوچھتے ہیں. تو اس میں بہت ساری وہ چیزیں بھی ہیں جو عقیدے کی خرابی کی وجہ سے پیدا ہو گئی ہیں. لیکن تاہم یہ بات کہ اکثریت نے کیا کرنا تھا, یہ تو اللہ تعالیٰ نے اس کا فیصلہ نہیں کیا تھا, اس کا فیصلہ لوگوں پہ چھوڑا تھا. اگر لوگوں کی اکثریت فرض کیجئے مان لیجئے کہ ایٹ دا اینڈ آف دا ڈے زیادہ تر وہ لوگ ہیں جنہوں نے اللہ سے انحراف کیا, تو یہ خدا کا بنایا ہوا تو قاعدہ نہیں ہے کہ آپ جانتے بوجھتے یہ کام کریں. خدا نے تو یہ الٹ بتایا کہ جی توحید آپ کی فطرت میں ہے, توحید کی سب سے بڑی آواز آپ کے اندر موجود ہے. تو انہوں نے تو یہ یہاں آپ کو سبق دیا. لیکن اگر آپ ہم اس آواز سے انحراف کریں, اس آواز کو نہ مانیں, تو اس میں اللہ تعالیٰ تو ظاہر ہے کسی طرح سے ان کو دوش نہیں دیا جا سکتا. تو یہ انسان کا اپنا اختیار ہے, تو اسی وجہ سے یہ معاملہ.
میں تو پارشلی اگری کروں گا, لیکن ایک سے اور بھی سوال ایجاد ہوتے ہیں کہ جیسے کہ اگر مان لیجیے کوئی جانتے بوجھتے بھی شرک کیا, تو اس کا اس کا رزلٹ کیا نکلا؟ کیا اصل حقیقی خدا سے کوئی اور خدا وجود میں آئے گا؟ لیکن ظاہر سی بات ہی نہیں آئے گا, یعنی خدا کو کوئی نقصان نہیں پہنچے گا اگر کوئی جانتے بوجھتے شرک بھی کیا. تو اتنا اسٹرکٹ اور سخت کیوں ہے خدا اس شرک کے اوپر؟ یہ مجھے سمجھ نہیں آیا.
اس لیے کہ قرآن مجید نے کہا نا یہ خدا پہ جھوٹ باندھنا ہے. یعنی ایک چیز کے بارے میں آپ کو پتہ ہے کہ وہ غلط ہے, اللہ تعالیٰ نے بتایا کہ دیکھیے
کہ اس جھوٹ سے تو خدا کو کوئی نقصان نہیں پہنچ سکتا نا. خدا کے یعنی صفات پہ, خدا کی یعنی اتھارٹی پہ کچھ
نہیں,
نقصان
خدا پہ تو نہیں پہنچ سکتا ہے, تو یہ انسان پہ ہی پہنچتا ہے نا. یہ دیکھیے یہ اصل میں سزا ہے بنیادی طور پہ ڈسلائلٹی کی. یہ ایسی سزا ہے کہ جیسے اللہ تعالیٰ, اور قدیم آسمانی صحائف میں اس کی مثال بھی آئی ہے کہ جیسے ایک خاتون اپنے میاں سے بدکاری کرے یا خیانت کرے, یہ ایسے ہی ہے کہ جیسے یہ یعنی اس کی مثال شرک کی دی گئی ہے کہ وہ لوگ کہ جو اللہ تعالیٰ سے خیانت کرتے ہیں وہ اصل میں خدا کا تو نہیں کچھ بگاڑتے, وہ تو اپنا بگاڑتے ہیں. تو یہ تو ایسے ہی ہے کہ انسان جب بہت سارے کام کرتا ہے تو وہ بد نظری کرتا ہے, یا مثال کے طور پہ کئی ایسے نقصان ہیں جس میں دوسرے کو کوئی نقصان نہیں پہنچتا, نقصان اسی فرد کو پہنچتا ہے. تو اللہ تعالیٰ کی یہ سزا کی وجہ یہ نہیں ہے کہ اللہ تعالیٰ کو کوئی اس سے فرق پڑ رہا ہے. اللہ تعالیٰ کی سزا کی وجہ یہ ہے کہ آپ کے سامنے ایک حق آیا, اس حق کو آپ نے تسلیم کیا کہ ہاں یہ سچ بات ہے, لیکن آپ نے استکبار کیا, آپ نے غرور کیا, آپ نے کہا کہ میں نے نہیں ماننا. تو یہ اصل میں یہ آپ کی جو یوں سمجھ لیجئے کہ غلطی ہے, اس کی سزا ہے. خدا کو تو اس سے نہ فائدہ ہو رہا ہے نقصان ہو رہا ہے. یہ اس کو بالکل آپ الٹ بھی سمجھ سکتے ہیں کہ جو لوگ اچھے اعمال کر رہے ہیں اور اپنے اعمال سے اگر جنت میں جا رہے ہیں تو خدا کو تو کوئی فائدہ نہیں ہو رہا اس سے, یعنی ذاتی طور پہ تو کوئی فائدہ نہیں ہو رہا. تو فائدہ تو اصل میں فائدہ اور نقصان کا تعلق انسان سے ہے.
لاسٹ پوائنٹ, تو اگر یہی لاجک اپلائی کریں تو اس حساب سے جو اگر کوئی مسلمان رشوت خور ہے جو ہمیشہ رشوت لیتا ہے, لیکن مانتا ہے جانتے بوجھتے رشوت لیتا ہے, مانتا ہے کہ گناہ ہے, خدا کے یہاں یہ گناہ صاحب ہوتا ہے, تو وہ بھی اس طرح سے کفر اور شرک ہوگا نا؟
نہیں, شرک نہیں ہے اس کو. دیکھیں ایک دونوں کی باتیں الگ الگ ہیں. شرک تو کہتے ہیں اللہ کی ذات میں آپ اللہ کی طرح کوئی اور مؤثر شخصیت مان لیں. نہیں, جانتے بوجھتے تو اصل میں اس چیز کو شنی بناتا ہے نا. دیکھیں ایک چیز کی جو گراوٹ ہے, ایک چیز کی جو جیسے کہتے ہیں نا کہ سنگینی ہے, اس میں اضافہ کرتا ہے جانتے بوجھتے کرنا جو ہے. ورنہ ایک چیز جو ہے مثلاً آپ اگر کر رہے ہیں, رشوت کا تعلق تو اصل میں کہ آپ کے عام لین دین سے اگر آپ جانتے بوجھتے جھوٹ بول رہے ہیں, جانتے بوجھتے رشوت کر رہے ہیں, گناہ تو وہ بھی ہے, لیکن اس کی سنگینی کی نوعیت وہ نہیں ہے جو شرک کے گناہ کی ہے. یعنی وہاں آپ خدا پر جھوٹ باندھ رہے ہیں اور یہاں آپ ایک بندے سے زیادتی کر رہے ہیں. تو خدا پہ جھوٹ باندھنا تو ایسے ہی ہے کہ جیسے آپ نے یہ محسوس کیا کہ بھی میرا خدا جس نے مجھے بنایا ہے, جس نے مجھے پالا ہے, جس نے مجھے دنیا کے اندر اتنی نعمتیں دی ہیں, میں اس سے کفران کروں اور میں اس کے بارے میں ایک رویہ اختیار کروں جس کے پاس میری کوئی دلیل نہیں ہے. تو خدا کا جو آپ پہ احسانات ہیں اور خدا سے جو آپ کے تعلق کے نتیجے میں جو جرم ہے اس کی نوعیت بہت مختلف ہے اس سے کہ جو آپ کسی فرد سے کریں گے.
Thank you very much,
شکریہ.
Dr. Saleem. Our next question comes from Nazish.
Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Saleem. I wanted to ask you a question regarding Surah Al-Tahrim, the forbiddance. So I was studying the clear Quran and the study Quran, and it has both different translation, which I was quite surprised about. So it's talking about the Prophet's wives, Hafsa and Aisha, and they're warned of plotting against the Prophet. So in the clear Quran, it refers to the Prophet having honey and staying longer with his wife, Zainab bint Jahsh. And yes, and in the study Quran, and Aisha being jealous. And then in the study Quran, it translates it as an incident of the Prophet having intimate relationship with the Coptic slave girl Maria. So they're very two different incidents. And I just wanted to know which one it is. I mean, I know in translations you can have variation, but this was like, completely different incidents.
Yeah.
So please, I would like to know.
So if you look at the text, I mean, the text does not mention any of these incidents. So these are basically interpretations of the exegetes, the mufassirun, the commentators. The Quran does not mention the issue of honey. The Quran does not mention Maria the Copt. So these are basically interpretations made by the mufassirun on the basis of some narrative that they have come across. Had the Quran wanted to divulge what happened exactly, it would have been very easy for God to say that such and such thing happened. All that we know from these incidents or these verses is that even the Prophet's wives, if they commit something which is against religion, they would be called to account for that. But what exactly they did, there is no detail that we can find in any correct tafsir, any correct narrative, I would say. So most of these narratives are called tafsiri narratives, and they have a lot of discrepancies, they have a lot of weaknesses. And my advice is that something which is contradictory to the Quran, something which has discrepancies, we have to leave that alone. And what the Quran precisely mentions is that something did happen, but it did not expose whatever happened. And the purpose, of course, was that, as the Quran says, "Arrafa ba'dahu wa a'raza an ba'd," that the Prophet wanted to bring to the notice of his wives that something had happened, and he actually divulged part of it, and he did not divulge some other parts of it, so that they could just draw an illusion and come and mend their ways. So I think that we have to also stick to this part. I mean, stick strictly that something did happen, but what did happen, we don't know of exactly. But the lesson that can be drawn is that in this matter, even the wives of the Prophet, if they do something which is unbecoming or which is something which is besides religion, then they too are called to account. And the whole exercise is to show that no one is above accountability, even the Prophet's wives.
Right. That makes sense. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Hassan, you're up next. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Shehzad.
Wa alaikum assalam.
Dr. Shehzad, my question is regarding the repeated commandment in the Quran that says, obey Allah and obey the Messenger, which is typically interpreted as follow the Quran and follow the Hadiths. But my question is, instead of that interpretation, would it be reasonable or justifiable if someone says that since the Quran itself contains the Qul verses, where in many occasions God asked the Messenger to say, and he said, and people obeyed. So by following the Quran itself, aren't we obeying the Messenger as well, and already complying with that commandment of obey the Messenger?
Yes, partly you're right. I mean, to regard Atiur Rasul to be implying a hadith is totally out of place. I mean, the time when the Quran was being revealed, there was no such hadith that existed. So basically what is being said is that whatever the Prophet tells you, and this basically is referring to the established Abrahamic Sunnah. I mean, this is something which has been passed down to the last Prophet from the previous lineage of prophets, which are the Abrahamic prophets. So like the prayer, for example, all worship rituals, all customs and etiquette, they have been passed down from previous prophets. So basically it is the authority of the Prophet, and hadith is nowhere implied here. What is being said here is that you have to obey the authority of the Prophet and you have to obey the authority of the Quran. Of course, when you are following the Quran, you're also following the Prophet, because the Prophet has given you the Quran. Basically, it's his authority on which we are accepting the Quran. But other than that, because he also has this authority in which he has given something which is independent of the Quran, which I just said is the established Sunnah of the Abrahamic prophets, or the Sunnat Ibrahimi as we call it. So it is basically referring to that.
So can I just clarify? So it's basically Quran and the living Sunnah, the practicing Sunnah.
Yeah,
is that enough?
Practicing, not hadith at all.
Yeah, thank you. Jazakallah.
Thank you. Habiba Zafar, you're up next. Please go ahead.
Sir, Assalamu alaikum. Sir, it is said that we can do wudu over nail polish when we have applied nail polish after doing wudu. But masa application is for 1 day if we are at home. Masa over the socks is for 1 day if we are at home and 3 days if we are having a journey. So for how long can we do masa over the nail polish?
So, because basically this is an ishtihad, I mean, it should not be confined to 1 or 3 days. So, as long as you're wearing the nail polish, it is fine. You can do it as long as the nail polish is there, and once you reapply it, you can do, wuzu again freshly and then put on your nail polish. But as long as the nail polish is there, there are different periods for different types of nail polishes. So, because there are so many new products that are flashing over all over the world, so it does not confine itself to any number of specific days. As long as it is there on the nails, you can do wuzu over it.
Sir, thank you so much. Jazakallah.
Thank you, Dr. Saleem. Neha, you're up next.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone.
Walaikum
My
assalam.
question is actually related to the daily practices. So basically, my husband has a shop and he sells mirrors and different types of decorations. So he's got a customer who, for example, if she's buying something for 10 Saudi riyals, she would ask him to make a receipt for 20 Saudi riyals. So we don't know why she's doing that, but we have this doubt that she might be employed by a person and she's showing the actual receipt, the fake receipt to the person and pocketing the extra 10. So in that case, do we tell her that we cannot do it? And is it wrong for us to make her that wrong receipt, or should we? And actually, it's like a common practice in the market as well. If the customer asks you to make a receipt that's of a higher amount, people usually do it. We tell her no because we think it's something wrong. It might be haram, it might be a guna, or do we continue with it?
Yeah, I think this is absolutely wrong. I mean, you see, the person or the buyer is faking a receipt. He or she would like to claim the expense from whichever company he or she might be employed in, or it could be some other reason, could be taxation or something else. But the bottom line is, you just cannot change the exact happening. So you sold it for 10 riyals. The receipt has to be 10 riyals. How can it be a different receipt? It cannot be less. It cannot be more. It would be forgery on the part of the shopkeeper, the shop owner as well. He or she should not in any way cooperate in such instances and tell the person clearly that as far as the receipt is concerned, it will be made of the exact amount at which the product is sold.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem. Our next question asks, how can a common Muslim work for the end of prophethood? Please reply in Urdu.
How can a common Muslim work for what?
The end of prophethood.
I'm sorry, I'm not able to understand this question. What does it mean?
Okay, so for the person who wrote that, please clarify in the chat and I'll ask the question again. Rahman Ahmed, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Assalamu alaikum. So my question is that we all are striving to follow the correct religion that Allah asks us or the Holy Prophet guided us, right? But if we are reading the books and we are trying to follow the correct essence of the religion, but let's say that we reached the wrong conclusion or we followed the wrong thing, so what would be the case on the day of judgment for us?
So that is a case in which in the Quran is given a ruling that if you do something which is in fact wrong, but sincerely and consciously you thought that it was correct, you will not be penalized for that. Because you see, it is not reaching the truth which is our responsibility. It is to try to reach for the truth which is our responsibility. So if you have not tried enough, you will be penalized. But if you tried hard and sincerely tried to get to a point, but ultimately what we understood was something wrong, in actual fact, so that shall not be penalized at all because it was not done deliberately.
Thank you so much. Jazakallah.
Thank you. Akram Bhatti, please go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum, sir.
Walaikum salam.
Sir, my question is a translation of this ayah. This is 95 ayah of Al-Anbiya. وَحَرَامٌ عَلَى قَرْيَةٍ أَهْلَكْنَاهَا أَنَّهُمْ لَا يَرْجِعُونَ. In a clear, normally it's been translated that all those if a Korea town is destroyed by us due to the wrongdoing, it will never come back again. But in clear Quran says because it's double negative that commentators discuss and interpret in order to avoid the meaning. It is forbidden unto any town we have destroyed that they shall not return, which would mean that they would necessarily return. Are they talking about hereafter, or what do you think is correct?
Basically, this is a double negative which is put forth here, and I think I'll advise you to look up the commentaries of Ustaz Amin Hassan Islahi or Ustaz Javed Ahmed Ghamidi, and they have clarified that here the word is actually meant for expressing intention, that those people for whom destruction has been made incumbent because of their own ill ways, they will never return. I mean, they will never return to the truth. So it's related to this world, and it is related to the addressees of a messenger of God. Because remember, for a messenger of God, the rule is that if they deny intentionally, then they are punished in this world. So the law of Itmamul Hujjah that I've been describing all along is basically what is being described here. That in the presence of God's messengers, if people intentionally deny, then God has actually made his decision about them, that such people will never come back, because now they have done something out of their own intention.
Well, I read Ustad Ghamdi's translation and also the Dabur Quran. I got confused because it came to my head, or maybe Allah is talking about everyone would be resurrected.
So this is specifically to the addressees of messengers of God. I mean, all messengers of God, about them it is the Almighty has said that when they intentionally, deliberately adhere to wrong things, when they know that they are wrong, but they still would like to go ahead with that, then God has made it incumbent upon them as a punishment that they will never return, they will never accept the truth. Because, I mean, this is like a punishment that they are facing, that they were ones who clearly knew what the truth is, but they still did not accept it. So now there is no turning back.
But at the end of the Yom Kippur, they will have to,
That's another, yes. I mean, even on the Day of Judgment, this punishment will continue. I mean, because, this verse is not related to the Day of Judgment, but for messengers of God, as far as their nations are concerned, elsewhere in the Quran we find that not only in this world are they punished, but this punishment is going to go on in the time of Barzakh, and also when they are raised to life in the next world. So this is like a threefold punishment. In this world, at the time that everyone is sleeping in Barzakh, they will be, shown their place of destruction, and when they get up on the Day of Judgment. So all these three instances would be ones in which they are punished. So basically, it's a delineation of the punishment of intentional denial.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem. Mushtaba Azam, please go ahead.
Dr. Saab, is getting a knowledge is a virtue? If yes, then which knowledge? Worldly knowledge or Islamic knowledge?
Where is it written that getting knowledge is virtue?
For example, if there is an Islamic scholar, he must have some advantage over others who does not.
That is for an Islamic scholar, the Quran is very evident in Surah Tawbah, verse 123, that tafaqquh fi din, which means a deep insight in religion, a deep understanding of religion, is absolutely essential. You cannot advise people and talk about religion unless you are well versed. So for scholars and for people who take up the responsibility of guiding other people, the Quran has said in Surah Tawbah, verse 123, فَلَوْلَا نَفَرَ مِنْ كُلِّ فِرْقَةٍ مِّنْهُمْ طَائِفَةٌ لِيَتَفَقَّهُوا فِي الدِّينِ. So why is it that not some people came ahead and presented themselves and said that, and did not gain sound knowledge in religion, and then went back to their people and warned them. So this particular aspect is absolutely clearly covered in the Quran. So that, of course, refers to knowledge of the Quran and Sunnah.
Verse number 32, Surah Zukhruf, where the God says, we have raised some of you amongst the others. So everybody cannot become a scholar. Some has to take a political seat. Some has to take some other seat.
So that is why the surah, in Surah Tawbah, the words are فَلَوْلَا نَفَرَ مِنْ كُلِّ. So why didn't a group of people? So it's not talking about all people, a part of you. So people who, it's not that every single person.
So that group will go ahead of us. But I want to go ahead.
Not necessarily. You see, not necessarily. Knowledge is not going to take you ahead. It's your deeds which are going to take you ahead. Knowledge can be with a person, and a person can be very, he would have an average knowledge. But the thing is, his conscience and the will to do righteous deeds is found equally in every person. So that is the test through which everyone is put. It's not correct to say that people who have more knowledge will be perhaps placed higher than the other people. Well, if they have more knowledge, their accountability will be tougher, and they'll be held accountable according to their own knowledge. So people who are less knowledgeable, they have an equal chance to outdo them, because you see, it's not knowledge that's going to take you towards higher grades in paradise. It's basically how you follow and practice whatever knowledge you have.
So why should I get the knowledge if I will get God because of this knowledge? So it's mean I should.
So it is. So you see, it's just telling us that there should be some people who would be specialists in religion. That is all. It's like appealing that you start gaining knowledge in various disciplines. You become chemists and doctors and have specializations in so many other fields. So there should be some people who should be doctors of religion also. It's all that the Quran is saying. It's not that everyone should become a doctor. It's just that it's like saying that, well, naturally you go towards various other fields, so would that you also come towards this also.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem. Our next question asks, it's said that if a person recites 7 times in the morning and evening, Hasbi Allahu la ilaha illallah, illallah, huwa alayhi tawakkaltu wa huwa rabbil arsh al-azim, then Allah keeps him safe from all sorrows, etc. during the day. Is it the 7 times recitation of this verse that counts, or is it the meaning that counts and the results in the
there is no authentic saying which says that if you pronounce these words, then you'll be in the protection of God. This is all made up. This is all concocted. You'll find that there was a period in our ummah about 1,000 years ago when all sorts of narratives were fabricated and concocted to make people. The people who were fabricating them, they had this intention that, well, people will utter these words, it will bring them closer to God, and at least it will create some proximity with the Almighty. So this intention was very noble, but for this they devised that they would concoct narratives and say that they go all the way to the Prophet. So there is not a single narrative of such a sort that can be reliably traced to the Prophet. Protection of God is something, if you have to obtain it, then the best way is to read the last 2 surahs of the Quran, because the 2 surahs say that I seek refuge with you, O Almighty. A'udhu bi Rabbil Falaq, A'udhu bi Rabbin Nas. So this is like seeking refuge. But having said that, even if you recite these 2 verses or these 2 surahs, it doesn't mean that that protection cannot be in any way compromised, because if God wants, something can happen to you. You can fall sick. You can go through an accident. So all these things, they can happen even if you recite these verses of the Quran. So all that they do is that they connect you to God. They make you realize that God is our only protector. God is the only one that whom we should turn to. But it doesn't mean that it's like a magic or something which has surrounded you. Once you utter these words, and nothing bad will happen to you. So the Quran has said that even when something bad happens to you, it is always by the will of God. Bi-iznillah. It happens because God then lets that protection, lifts that protection, and then let that thing happen, because as these things happen for our own trial and for our own test, so at times God lets these things happen. So we must not think that uttering words is something of a magic, it's like an abracadabra, in which we are, if we utter this mantra, then we'll be in the safe protection of God. It's not like, it doesn't work like that.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem. The next question asks, एक आम मुसलमान खत्म नबूवत के लिए कैसे काम कर सकता है, क्योंकि अक्सर उलमा से सुना है कि खत्म नबूवत पर पर्दा डाल देना पर मुसलमान पर फर्ज है.
The best thing is that the finality of the Prophet of God.
Please reply in Urdu.
Okay. So इसका मतलब सिर्फ ये है कि आपको अपने पैगंबर के बारे में कुरान मजीद में इत्तला दी है कि वो आखिरी नबी हैं, उससे बाखबर होना चाहिए कि वो ख़ातमुन नबिय्यीन हैं, कुरान ने इनको कह दिया है. तो आपको कोई इसके लिए कोई तहरीक नहीं चलानी, आपको कोई इसके लिए लोगों को बुरा भला नहीं कहना. आपके अपने गाइडेंस के लिए, आपकी अपनी तदरीस के लिए, आपकी अपनी हिदायत के लिए कुरान मजीद ने बता दिया कि नबूवत ख़त्म हो गई है. नबूवत शुरू हुई थी हज़रत आदम से, वो ख़त्म हो गई हज़रत मोहम्मद सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम। और बस ये एक इत्तला है जो आपको दी गई है ताकि आपको पता चल जाए कि अब अल्लाह ताला के नबूवत के ख़ात्मे के बाद कोई नबी नहीं आएगा, और कोई अगर ये दावा करता है तो वो गलत दावा होगा।
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem. Saif Farouk, please go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Saab. Hope you're well.
वालेकुम अस्सलाम। Yes,
Okay.
alhamdulillah.
Yes. Actually, I have a couple of at least two questions. First is
Saif,
basically.
I'm sorry,
Ji.
you can only ask one question per round.
Okay. Okay. Acha, okay. I know that mortgage is, a house for buying a house is allowed, of course, as per the understanding of, Al-Mawrid. So what if I, instead of, if there is an option of personal loan, getting a personal loan to buy a house, let's say it's, available on a very low interest, and there is hardly a paperwork involved in personal loan. So is it also okay if a person can get a personal loan to buy a house? You get the amount,
Yes, I
let's say
understand. Yeah,
X amount,
I understand.
and so you think is that allowed?
I
Because
mean, it's equally fine. You see, it's equally fine if you are getting a loan. I mean, you're getting a mortgage. That's also a form of a loan, but you're now getting an asset instead of hard cash. So it's entirely your choice. Both are legally and Islamically perfectly okay. It's your own sweet choice. If you'd like hard cash so that you can buy something yourself, that's also fine. And if you'd like arrangement with the bank in which it finances your house, that's also fine. So it's basically your choice.
Inshallah. So there is no issue. All right.
Yep.
All right, sir. Thank you. Okay.
Javed Ishrat, please go ahead. And for those who have second rounds of questions, who have further questions, you can raise your hand again. Though looking at the time, I don't think we'll have enough time for everyone. Javed Ishrat, please go ahead.
अस्सलाम वालेकुम। अभी
वालेकुम
कुछ दिन पहले
अस्सलाम।
हमने एक प्रोग्राम सुना था आप ही के मदरसे से, यानी कि आप ही की ऑर्गेनाइजेशन अल-मवारिद से। उसमें तवातुर का जो जिक्र हुआ था कि ये शिया जो नमाज पढ़ते हैं 3 वक्त की नमाजें, ये तवातुर इंडिया से इनके पास आया। क्या ये तवातुर एक्चुअली हम इसको सही तौर पे हमारे पास कोई सोर्सेज नहीं थे इसको हम देख सकें इस वक्त हम, तो जरा प्लीज हमें गाइड कर देंगे ये तवातुर जो 3 नमाजों का तवातुर है ये कब से स्टार्ट हुआ? ऑफ कोर्स पहले दिन से तो स्टार्ट नहीं हो सकता, ये पहले दिन से तो 5 नमाजें थी, तो ये 3 नमाजों का तवातुर या 3 वक्त की नमाज 3 वक्त पढ़ने का, पढ़ते तो 5 ही हैं लेकिन 3 वक्त पढ़ने का ये तवातुर।
ये देखें, ये बात के तारीख़ी तौर पे कब शुरू हुआ, ये तो एक तारीख़ी तहकीक है। आप सबसे अच्छा तरीका तो ये कि शिया उलमा से ख़ुद पूछें, वो आपको तारीख़ बता देंगे। यानी ये तो सिर्फ़ एक तारीख़ी तहकीक है ना कि किस ज़माने में शुरू हुआ, तो इसके सबसे अच्छा सोर्स वो ख़ुद हैं। हम तो सिर्फ ये कह सकते हैं कि ये प्रैक्टिस ठीक नहीं है, नमाज़ें 5 ही हैं, उन्होंने वो भी 5 ही समझ के पढ़ते हैं, लेकिन वो 2 को परमानेंटली उन्होंने कंबाइन कर दिया है ज़ुहरैन और मगरिबैन कह के। तो हम तो इस पर कुछ कलाम कर सकते हैं, लेकिन तारीख़ी तौर पे तो ये एक ऐसी मालूमात है जिसके सबसे बेहतर जो मसूल या माखज़ हैं वो ख़ुद शिया उलमा हैं जिन्होंने इस प्रैक्टिस को अपहोल्ड किया हुआ है। आप उनसे पूछिए।
चलिए, बहुत थैंक यू वेरी मच सर, थैंक यू।
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem. Our next question comes from Noshad Shafkat. Please go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Saab.
Walaikum assalam.
Dr. Saab, my question is that all of us at some time or the other in our lives, we pray for our parents, whether they are alive or whether they are dead. And this is something that consoles one in the heart. And on the other hand, we have Hazrat Ibrahim, and in Surah Baqarah, ayat 124, God has given him such a high position that he fulfilled all the promises. And yet he has been stopped from praying for his father, except for that one time when he had promised his father to pray for him. That's in Surah Tawbah, I believe. Why would God impose a restriction? God could have allowed him to pray and not accepted his prayer. But stopping a son from praying for his father is a little harsh, I think. Any son would love to do.
Right. Actually, you see, it was me and you, of course, this would be perfectly okay because we don't know who our fathers or mothers are and what their exact fate would be. And so, therefore, in the presence of any uncertain information, we would always be praying. But you see, in this case, the Almighty conveyed to Abraham that his father is going to be someone because he was a avowed idolater, and he was, of course, the chief priest of the temple. So he's not going to be able to save himself. So it's like God divulging an information to someone, so to a prophet of God. And when God says something that, well, this is certain that he's not going to be saved on the day of judgment, and there's no point in asking for forgiveness, it actually gives us this law that people who have become eligible for hell, and the person who is telling you that this eligibility is correct is no other than God himself, then even for parents we cannot pray. So this is like an ultimate criteria which God has said that yes, in normal circumstances, in the absence of any knowledge, I would certainly pray for my father and mother. But when these circumstances are different, and when God is interfering and telling you that, well, your father or your mother is someone who has been destined to go to hell, then even for them you cannot pray. So it's like the reverse, basically. I mean, in the absence of knowledge, we will do what you have just said. But when God says that, well, it has been destined for him because of his ill ways, then your prayer cannot even save your parents, because, I mean, they have earned what they have earned because of their own deeds.
So what I'm saying is that even if his prayer had been in futility, that God would not accept, and he was destined for hell, his father, why would a prophet be stopped from praying? Because that is something, that is a relationship that exists come what may, come what circumstances. My father might have been an idolater. He could have been, literally making statues of idols.
Yeah, but you see, in that case, we don't know his fate. I mean, it does seem harsh because you see, it's a reality. It's a harsh reality. You see, for us, we have no knowledge of the fate of our parents. So in the absence of knowledge, we would always do so, even if we see them doing something which is very close to polytheism. Even then, we will ask for their forgiveness. But look what Abraham actually did. He did try to argue with God, and he did pray for once, but he was later on stopped because God said, well, his laws are unrelenting even for parents. So I think it's, and the same thing is applied in the case of Prophet Muhammad as well. You see, the Quran has stopped him for praying for mushrikun and has said that you cannot pray for these people who are annaka ashabul jahim, annahum ashabul jahim, that they are companions of hell now because they are destined for hell. Very similar is the case in Surah Tawbah for his people that he didn't know of, but they have been destined for hell. So I think it's the question that we have to reverse, basically. It's like reverse engineering, that God actually is telling us that in the absence of knowledge, it is fine. But once I tell you that the fate that is destined for them is, there's not a speck of doubt, then there is no need for you to pray for someone about whom Almighty says that I have decided that there's no relenting for such a person.
I'm sorry for dragging my feet on this, but why didn't God just let him pray and not tell him even?
Precisely. So you see, precisely for this reason, that God's law is unrelenting. Even very strong emotion. The strongest emotions that I can have is for my parents. Isn't that? That's why you're arguing in favor of Abraham. So God is trying to tell us that even in such a case, when your parents, you could not have more affiliation to anyone than your parents. But when I tell you, God says that they are people who deserve hell, then it would be like crossing God or overtaking His commandments if you do so. So you see, our interest and our love is for the truth. Our affiliation is for the truth. That is precisely what God wants to inculcate in us, that when the truth is lying opposite to your affiliations, then you have to go for the truth. So yes, I will be very attached to my parents, but if God tells me that your parent deserves hell, then my attachment has to be for the truth, not for my emotions.
Right, sir. Thank you very much, Doctor. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem. The next question asks, should we allow our kids to marry a non-Muslim if they decided to do so by themselves without the parents' consent and do not want to discuss on this matter? What should be our responsibility as Muslim parents to handle this situation?
We should, I mean, it's not question of allowing them because we have no reason to stop them. The question of allowing them can only be valid if you say that we have a authority to stop them. We don't have authority to stop them in any way. They are adults, and if they decide to take a particular path in life, it is their choice. You are not responsible for them, and that is why the Almighty has created every single person, has given them the freedom to choose with his life or her life. So if they choose a path which you don't like, I mean, they are responsible for that. So you must not interfere, you must not cause any hindrance. In fact, you should be part of such a wedding, you should give your blessings. So remember, it's not that you are going to be held accountable for the decisions of your children who are grown up and adult. You were required to groom them, and if you did your job, that is fine. If you did not do your job, then that is something to think about. But if you did your job and still your children turned out to be different from what you expected them to be, it's again not your concern. So your concern should have been when they were growing up. Did you give them enough time? Did you groom them? Did you give them proper knowledge? So that is a matter of more grave concern, I would say. But once they have become adults, now they are free to choose whatever they would like to do. You must not cause any hindrance in their decisions.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem. The next question asks, to prevail in trial and errors phenomenon in the youngsters, should we as parents refrain from saying anything to our kids when they're not taking care of their health by eating unhealthy junk food or shouting nonsense while playing violent online games, despite advising them many times on the importance of being healthy and adopting physical activity, listening to their parents, and etc.? They prefer to sit in their own room in front of PC all day and avoid sitting with us or meeting with guests.
Well, I think this is more a question of fault lying with the parents and not with the children. I mean, this happens when you don't give enough attention when the children are growing up and not doing your part of the deal, I would say. So if you are absentee parents, this is what generally happens. Your children, at times, they don't listen to you, they have their own mind. I mean, yes, this does happen at adolescence when every child is going through a particular phase, and he or she is headstrong and would like to do what he or she faces in life and would like to take a decision of. But other than that, I again would say that parenting is an art, and it is often when we lose our children, or in any way we are not able to see that they are doing the right thing, that suddenly we realize that we have to do something. So you see, we have to be parents who are present all the time during the time that they need these nurturing advice. But once they are in a particular quandary, I would say, then it has to be very wise handling on the part of parents. And there's no rule of thumb. I mean, there are different scenarios and different situations. At times you have to lure them, at times you might fix a price for them, at times you might give an incentive to them, at times you can show your own cold shoulders. You see, these are different techniques. It all depends what the age of the child is, also depends on the atmosphere that he's living in and the peer pressure that he or she might be facing. So there are a number of things. So unless absolutely more information and very clear picture is given, no precise advice can be given. But in the absence of that, as I said, you have to deal with your parents with your children in a very wise way, without causing them to show disgust on you or talking back to you, because you see, this is how you have to deal with them. So dealing with your children is an art, and you might like to listen to a few of my talks which I have given on parenting, which Mariam may provide you. So in those talks I've tried to actually, I think I've done a series, if I'm not forgetting, on this topic as well, in which you are able to talk to your young ones in a way, especially if they're living in a Western culture, that how you can put across your own view without actually making them repulsive to it, and at the same time not be repetitive.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem. Abdurrahman, please go ahead. And please note, everyone, that we only have 10 minutes remaining. So for the second round of questions, those with raised hands, please keep your questions very concise. Abdurrahman, please go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Saleem. Sir, I had a question with regards to hadith. I mean, like on hadith, there are many conditions kept. Like in Mizan, there are 8 principles of accepting hadith. Like it should be within the framework of Quran, and hadith is not an independent source of religion, all those stuff. So why we should take hadith seriously? I mean, I might sound like a hadith rejecter, but I'm asking like, why we should give value to hadith in Islamic discourse or Islamic studies?
So you see, it's prophetic knowledge. I mean, it's like the greatest scholar of religion talking to you. And yes, you have to investigate whether what has reached you is correct or not. So if you are giving importance to any other scholar, for example, if you're giving importance to Abu Hanifa or to Shafi'i, or let's say amongst later scholars to Abul Kalam Azad or to Amin Hassan Islahi, then it is all the more befitting that you give some more attention to someone who is a scholar of religion. So basically, it's his knowledge that is being given to you. And the only thing that you need to be sure of is that it has reached you safely, and there is nothing of the sort of forgery involved in it. Otherwise, it's like the Prophet saying something, commenting on a situation. And my own experience with hadith of the last 30 years is that, barring those narratives which need to be rejected, there is a very vast corpus of narratives which give a lot of insight in the wisdom of religion, how to improve ourselves personally as Muslims, how we can be more punctual and more God conscious, more aware of our religion. So it's basically benefiting from the knowledge of the Prophet. That's why, it's a very important thing. But remember, as you said, it's not an indispensable part of religion, because religion is enshrined in the Quran and Sunnah. And as far as hadith is concerned, it's like a bonus. It's like the prophetic knowledge reaching us, and it's just a question of verifying whether that is correctly ascribed to him or not. And if it is, as I said, my own experience is that it gives you a lot of insight.
Sir, I just had a follow-up on that. My question originally arose from this place, how do we know that this hadith is finally verified? Because it's a developing science, right? What Imam Bukhari did is different from what Ibn Abbas is doing, what Albani is doing, right? So it's a developing science. So can we able to be sure that this has reached final verification?
We can never be sure about even the Quran's interpretation if we take that as a yardstick. The interpretation of the Quran is again a developing thing. You'll find some of the very latest scholars giving you more precise and seemingly more correct views than the previous one, and maybe the ones who are going to come tomorrow and in the next century are going to be even more precise. So you see, knowledge is always developing. So we don't stand on absolute knowledge. What we stand is relative knowledge, which means that what I consider correct as today, as far as my knowledge is today. So I am responsible from what I have today. I am not responsible. Yes, when I have a developed knowledge, maybe I'm alive or not alive, that's another thing. But if I'm alive and some revision takes place, I'll look at that and I'll revise my previous understanding. So that is what precisely God wants us to do in every sphere of life, not just the hadith. As I said, the Quran's interpretation is also developing. So for us is that we have to find out the truth until our own times. We just cannot go into the future, but from the past right up to our times, yes, that is a possible thing. And that is what God, would like us to do. He would not like to, be perfect in any case. So what I consider correct today is what I'm responsible of.
Thank you very much, Dr.
Thank you, sir.
Neha, please go ahead. Neha?
My question was regarding the hijab. I wanted to ask, to do a hijab, is it okay if a girl is wearing loose baggy jeans, like modest clothing, an overcoat over her t-shirt, or does she have to wear an abaya? Is abaya compulsory to do the hijab?
Not at all. Not at all. If you look at the Quran, we've been discussing this affair of Islam a number of times in these sessions, and also separately we've talked about this. Abaya is just a form of a dress which is recommended in certain parts of the world. The Quran does not even use this word. In fact, the Quran doesn't even use the word hijab ever in the whole corpus to imply your head covering. Other than that, what the Quran says is that you need to wear dress in a way that it does not expose your cleavage, it does not expose your private parts, and for that you can wear a loose dress, any baggy dress or any loosely covered dress. And as far as covering your head is concerned, this is only compulsory when you have made up your hair, when you have embellished your hair, which means that you've added something to it. Otherwise, if you've just combed your hair, or maybe just in a normal way, then even covering the hair is not an obligation. It's a recommendation, yes, but in the absence of any embellishment, it's just a recommendation, it's not an obligation. But when you have embellished your hair, then it is essential to cover it. And as far as the rest of the body is concerned, if you wear a loosely covered dress, that is fine.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem. Hassan, you're up next. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Dr. Shehzad, there is a difference of opinion on whether all prophets are messengers or all messengers are prophets. Is there a clear proof from the Quran that tells us which one is true?
There is no difference of opinion. Every single messenger was a prophet. The reverse is not true. And as far as the fact is concerned, messenger or the word Rasul, and if you look at the word prophet and you translate it as Nabi, then it's like saying that all Rasuls are Nabi, but all Anbiya or all Nabis are not Rasuls, because Rasul is like a higher cadre in prophets. So it's like saying that, look at the example from the army perspective. Let's say there's a soldier and there's a general. So all generals are soldiers, but all soldiers are not generals, because general is a soldier of a higher rank. In a similar way, Rasul or a messenger has a one step ahead of the prophets of God. That is what we know from the Quran. And the difference in this regard is that these messengers or the Rasul, they decide the fate of their nation in this world. They deliver the truth on behalf of God, and if their nation collectively denies that truth, which means intentionally denies that truth, then they are punished in this very world. In the case of the prophet of God, this doesn't take place. Yes, they deliver the truth, but the punishment of their nation doesn't take place in this world.
Thank you.
Rahman Ahmed, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. So if a person accepts Islam, is it mandatory for him to present it to his parents as well? Or is it okay, especially when he doesn't have that much connection with them?
You see, as Muslims, the Almighty says that, if we are scholars, of course, our responsibility is different. But for a common man, the Almighty has described the responsibilities in Surah Asr, which means that in our immediate surroundings, it is our responsibility to divulge the truth that we know to people whom we know and about whom we know that they listen to us. So if you think that your parents are not going to listen to you or there's some disconnection, then you should first mend that connection and then think of communicating them what we'd like to communicate to them. Otherwise, communication is the first thing that it's like a barrier. If you've not broken the barrier, then there's no use crossing it without any objective. So it has to be understood that the Quran has said, "Zakkir in naf'ati zikra," that you remind people and you can talk to people if it is going to be beneficial for them, if they are open to listen to you. If they're not even willing to listen to you, then you should first, mend that part of that communication gap. And once that is done, then the Quran says that it is your responsibility to communicate the truth in your own surroundings. It could be your colleagues, it could be your friends, and then again, not at the pedestal that you place yourself as a scholar of religion, but all, like basic truths, like for example, reading the Quran. You can talk to your children or your parents or your colleagues that this is something that we should do. Or if you see someone lying or doing something which is unjust, you can perhaps take him to one side and give your own advice. So these are like simple truths that you can communicate to your surroundings. But as far as a proper scholarly, teaching is concerned, so that basically is the responsibility of scholars. For a common man, the responsibility is to communicate whatever you know, whatever basic things you know, to your surroundings, and that too, if those surroundings are conducive to accepting what you say.
Thank you very much, Dr.
Thank you.
Saleem. Last question that we can squeeze in. What was the system in which the caliphs were chosen? Was the same system applied every single time a new caliph was chosen?
So we can say that in the first four caliphs, the rightly guided caliph, this system was in vogue, that the caliph was chosen from the majority party. So the party, which was the Quraysh, which enjoyed the confidence of the majority, they were the ones who were chosen. And it's exactly the same. The Quran calls it shura, although it does not give it this precise name. It calls it consultation. But if you look at modern political systems, then what we call democracy is exactly the same thing, that you choose, people are free to choose their rulers, and if there is a difference of opinion, then the majority party prevails. So this is exactly what happened and what the Quran has actually advised in Surah Shura, and the first four caliphs also followed that. But after the demise of Ali, when he was actually assassinated, then we see that there's a whole huge change that took place, and this process of electing from the majority, it actually transformed, it changed into a monarchy and more of a dictatorship. And monarchy, we can say, because after Ali, when Muawiyah became the ruler, so right after him, when he nominated his son Yazid, and then there was a whole chain that followed right up to 1924, in which this system was changed from a democracy to a monarchy, and that's how things went. But in the first 30 years of Islam, this was strictly adhered to.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem, so much for answering all the questions and clarifying our confusions. And thanks a lot to all the participants who showed up